Welcome to Silver Lining for Learning, episode 250. Just saying that blows my brain. I was walking the dog this morning, and a couple of friends, we always walk our dogs together. And they have come to know that on Saturdays, I'm usually sort of thinking about Silver Lining. So we started talking about it, and they said, do you have funding for this? Like, how much does it come? Like, no, the five of us just put money in and we do it for the curiosity and the love. And here we are 5 years down the road. So I'm super excited to be here with Chris Dede from Harvard, Kurt Baum from Indiana, Lydia Kao from the University of Toronto. I'm Punya Mishra from Arizona State University. Yang Zhao is somewhere in, I don't know, wherever he is when he's flying around.
Hey,
So he can
Punya,
join us.
in addition, you've got listed on the homepage. Just noticed this yesterday that we're in a top 100 educational podcast show. I didn't realize that.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you find that, or
Yeah, somebody told me that, and I took it at face value, but I don't know how much to trust these things, stop this, stop that, but sure, we'll put it on our webpage. No, I'm good with that if it's reasonably credible. I don't even know what that means. Maybe there are only 101 podcasts on education, so take that with a grain of salt, but that's okay. So yes, this is we started this at the time of the global pandemic. We have shifted in our interests over time, but I think what has stayed constant is acknowledging and recognizing the good work that different people across the world are doing in the educational space, the innovations, large and small. So we've had so many different guests over the past 250 episodes. So I'm going to pass the baton to you and ask you what you guys are thinking and about this. It is a milestone, to be honest. If nothing else, we have spent more than 250 hours together. That's something. I mean, we still talk to each other, tolerate each other, like each other. So there is something good there, more than anything else. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in with some thoughts, and then we'll pick up some themes and ideas after that.
Well, one thing is the wealth of resources that we all have out there. The networks, our connections. It's all in the connections, and we really have them. I've learned a lot about the people that weren't on my radar, that you guys have brought in, that are entrepreneurs, innovators, model creators, that are researching in schools and higher ed and governments and corporate settings. We haven't had a lot of corporate ones. Maybe we could have a few more on the show if we had an area that we haven't explored fully. But we've been in all educational sectors, all environments over the past 5+ years. I mean, it's 5.5. Plus. So it's been a long time. We've gone down this road, and when we think about our careers, all the time that people invest in, become a scholar in higher education or wherever they happen to be, people spend 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. This past 5.5/6 years is a significant chunk of each of our careers. When you think about it, it's not a small slice, it's a significant chunk. So the investment that we've each made, the chance for me to be with all of you for that portion of your careers is, an honor for me to be with you each week, in effect, and to come up with interesting shows, ideas, new adventures into the world of Italy and France and Brazil and Chile and South Africa and UK and Canada and US, Mexico, you name it. We have been around the world. I was just in Bangkok, yesterday, and we've had people from Bangkok on the show. We have had Myanmar. We've had China, of course, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia. I was with the person who was on the show from Indonesia yesterday, in fact. I saw her on the elevator before getting to the airport. Many people in Bangkok reminded me that they were on the show previously, or like Paul Kim, who's going to be on the show again in the not too distant future. People ask about it, about Silver Lining. ask what's coming up on the show, so that they can tune in. So it becomes a part of each of our identities, you know. And there's a lot of sweat capital goes into each show. I mean, contacting people to be on the show and getting agreements and getting the time, coordinating times, getting pictures and bios for the blog posts. This all takes time, and then the post um, uh, time of the follow-ups with each of the guests that we all do, and just the entire episode takes a lot to coordinate each of our schedules, in addition to the guest schedule. So I appreciate all of you for hanging in there during these almost 6 years of Silver Lining for Learning, and we've gotten 3 awards along the way. Doesn't hurt to get a couple of those things and keep us going, the momentum going. But maybe we need to figure out something else we could do as a team. Shirts or coffee cups or something like that. The Silver Lining for Learning show. When you watch these news shows, they each have a cup, a cup of tea sitting next to them with the name of the show on. That might be something that Lydia gets all of us for Christmas. I'm just saying.
I was thinking maybe there's something we can do next time I visit home and just order some swag for everybody.
I'll design it for you.
Oh yeah, let's.
I'll design
I
the
think that's
graphic
I
for
think
you.
that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So,
Kurt, just pick
you just get what I'm saying, that it's an
Yeah.
honor and a privilege to be here every week, just to do a show with one of you, but let alone all of you, and your reputations create an ambiance, an environment that no one else has. No one else has. Lydia.
I just want to piggyback on what you said. You said, this 6 years have been a significant chunk of everyone's career. And I just thought, oh, that's when my career started. was Silver Lining for
Don't rub
Learning.
it in, Lydia.
I was a first year PhD student when Silver Lining for Learning started. I remember, I think I told that story too many times on the show already.
First
Yeah.
year?
Yeah. And I was so locked down. I was in my room watching Silver Lining for Learning, and now come a long way. And then now this is my first year as assistant professor. So
There you go.
it is, the evolution of Silver Lining for Learning. I feel I grew with the show.
So I was thinking about the fact that if somebody had approached me that week in March 2020 and said, well, we'll offer you a contract to do this, but you have to do at least 250 shows, I would have said, I don't know.
And you have to pay money to do it.
Aren't you have to pay money to do
You
it?
have to
But
pay money to do it. Yes, we will.
my
give you this
major
problem.
concern would have been running out of material,
Right.
because I would have said, I don't celebrate everything. There are people in ed tech that celebrate everything. It's like, feel good camp, where if you're breathing in the morning, you get an award for it. I'm fussy about my ed tech, and I would have said 250, that's a lot. Well, listen, I'm a convert. There is so much, 90%, it's like an iceberg. 90% of the good work in the field is invisible because it's happening, as we've documented, locally. It's happening without massive resources. It's happening in global South countries that get little attention. And I think it's great. It certainly is a sign of optimism and hope that we keep coming up with episode after episode after episode, and you listen to the people and you think, wow, they're really making a difference in somebody's life. So I like the niche that we found, and I think that's part of where the awards come from, is that we're not one of many podcasts that sort of are like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. We're the opposite. We're going out and finding the people who are unknown and unrecognized by and large, and giving them a stage and listening to them and celebrating them. And if somebody now said, well, is there another 250? I would say, yeah, I bet that I'm not guaranteeing to do them, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
is there the raw material out there? Yes, I believe that there is, because so many good things are happening bottom up.
Yeah, I mean, couple of thoughts, right? So if I look back like 5 years, what has sort of, I mean, I don't think I've changed dramatically, but what has evolved in my thinking, and I think Silver Lining has played a very important role in that. I was always sort of inherently suspicious of grand plans to transform anything. Coming from India, where you see governments say, "Oh, we're going to do this 5-year plan, and it's going to do X, Y, and Z," and they don't really understand realities on the ground and so on. And so I'd always been more favorable towards sort of the upstarts, the people who are doing things in the margins and small pockets of innovation. And I think Silver Lining for Learning has really underlined that for me, that when we look at the grand schemes of sort of the corporations, or whether it's like the social media companies or the tech companies, and you look at what has happened with ed tech, like in the classroom, like if you're in a reasonably well-resourced school now, everybody has a Chromebook or a this or a that. And, so that part got solved, but it actually led to a lot more regimentation, a lot more sort of systematic, a position of almost surveillance capitalism. I mean, all of those kinds of things. And I think what Silver Lining has done for me is really highlight those pockets of where people are doing interesting. I mean, Lydia, some of the examples that you got, I mean, I keep going back to that Two Sisters on that, the Weekend app. I mean, I was like, just the fact that these two teenagers, I'm not even sure one of them was a teenager when they started, can do this. And even like we are having an episode coming up in a couple of weeks about a graduate student here at ASU, originally from Afghanistan, and the work that they have done to try to help girls' education, and like the persistence and the sort of just the doggedness that it takes to make something happen, even for 50 girls in Afghanistan. I mean, those are, I think, amazing and inspiring. And the final thing I'll say is that there's this book that popped up in my radar recently, which really made me think very hard. It's not about education. It's by this guy called James C. Scott, and it's called Seeing Like a State, and how certain schemes to improve the human condition have failed. And it is this indictment of sort of grand modernism, that we can come in and we can impose a solution for the world or for whatever area. And he takes examples from forestry to architecture and how we design cities and so on. And it really has made me think very hard. The parallels to education are absolutely stark and beautiful, though he doesn't touch education in his thing. And it's really a book worth reading to think about the sort of the lived knowledge that we tend to ignore or undermine when we come up with these grand schemes that solve problems for everybody. And so to me, Silver Lining at a personal level, intellectual growth level, has been emphasizing that, has underscored what I felt was sort of an intuition. It has just made it much stronger and given me a lot more faith in that. So that for me is one of the big takeaways from this 5 years of doing this.
So I want to mention one thing is, of all 250 shows that we've had, there's one that comes to mind that was on par with what Silver Lining for Learning's doing in terms of the influence and potential transformative nature of it and the long scale impact of it, and the utility of it for the ed tech world. And that's the show that we had on with Rick West, Jason McDonald, and Royce Kimmons on EdTech Books. And that happens to be the ones that won the Annual Achievement Award from AECT the year before we won it. So both of those two, ours being a podcast show, theirs being a set of books. And they had an announcement of a new book yesterday on design that just came out with Sean Gaw and one of our colleagues. But they've got dozens and dozens of free and open EdTech books out there that people are using, millions of downloads around the world. And so of all the people we've had, it's them, and maybe we could think of a way in which we have a joint show with them down the road, celebrating the because they've been almost in existence as long as Silver Lining. I'm not sure exactly when they started, but it was around the time that we started. But anyways, I just want to point that out. Can any of you think of another show that we've had in the past, 5.5 years, that with someone who's done something as, significant for the field of ed tech or in general?
Yeah, I mean, the edTech's book, I mean, this is to credit to BYU, to give them the support, and also, of course, the passion of people like Royce and Rick and Jason, to keep that going. It's a great resource, and it's at some level. I mean, this is what I find interesting. Like, if you think about Silver Lining, or if you think about edtech books, at heart, they're very simple ideas. It's like, let's find interesting people to have a conversation with. And their thing is, yeah, this is the age of the internet. Things should be free. And we are anyway, I mean, if you think about academics, we're all writing for free. I mean, we write for free, we edit for free, we review for free, everything is, for free. Why is the output not free? I mean, it's a very simple, in both our cases, simple logic, right? And one of the things that if we think about, like, the amount of money that we put into making this, there is a lot of freedom in that we have. There is nobody to, answer to. We can choose who we want or choose not. I mean, so coming back to your point, Kurt, about like why we don't have corporates in here, partly that's, I think, instinctually by design, which is when you get corporates in here, they are shilling their product. And I don't think that this show is about that. And in fact, that's an easy way to get money, is that you can get a sponsorship by somebody. I don't know how easy it is because we haven't tried. But because we have stayed away from that, we have focused on projects, we've focused on interesting people, taking on difficult challenges, coming up with innovative solutions. And there is something in the corporate world which forces them to sell. I mean, we get these emails all the time, but, oh, I want to be on the show, or can this person be on your show? And when you look at them, it's something that they're trying to sell. And for the most part, the people that we get on our show have nothing to sell. They have a story to tell, and they're very humble about it. They don't say, I have the answer, which is going to solve all of education's problems, which I think corporate sort of business pushes people to do, right? Oh, we're going to solve, like, I get these all the time, right? Like, oh, do you have a problem with students' engagement? We have the solution for you. No, you don't. If it was that simple, we would have fixed it long ago. It's a wicked problem. Education is a complex, wicked problem, and I think that's where I think EdTech Books does a great job, and I think that we do a good job. I mean, of promoting people and stories rather than products per se.
You bring up a good point about it being open and free. At the conference I was at last week at eLearn in Bangkok, there are a couple of people during different debate sessions, roundtable sessions, keynote conversations after the keynote, who've kind of pointed that the world since, 15 years ago when my World is Open book came out has become more closed in many ways.
Absolutely.
And increasingly so. And it struck a nerve with me anyhow that when they mentioned that they called the age of MOOCs, one person called it the optimism age. When they first were utilized 10, 15, 16 years ago, the age of open courses and open courseware and MOOCs and all this other thing was, maybe the golden age of learning being open for the world or the masses, of the potential for that to happen, and increasingly things have been cut off. We've not been. We're still open and free, and so is EdTech Books. But I see the monetization of education increasing. The corporatization of educational ideas. Constantly people coming to conferences and trying to co-opt an idea and monetize it. It's a little disappointing in some ways, but it also tells us that we have an important role to play, and that we have to keep pushing and keep finding new shows and interesting people to bring on. Lydia, it looked like you were going to say something.
Oh, I just want to mention on LinkedIn yesterday, someone mentioned to us that we should do quantitative ethnography on these 250 episodes that we've done. I thought that's a really interesting idea that we can see patterns and themes and connections. And I started doing this like a hobby project over the summer. I tried to like web scrape our website and run some analysis, but the scraping wasn't done so well, so we need a lot of manual fixing. I didn't have a time to, but maybe like later on, I'll come to it and then maybe actually run some analysis to see.
Two things.
Because you find a graduate student who's interested, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, what you're saying is exactly what Punya said. Would you like to be teamed up with one of my grad students who might be interested in working with you, and or each of us should be promoting this as a potential dissertation idea out there to, I'm serious. There are dissertations in this somewhere,
So the crazy part, Lydia, is it's not just the website, because YouTube does automatic transcription. So you actually have transcripts of every episode. Because some of the things that we talk about in the show don't often make it to the description that we have. The description is, pointing towards things that we will talk about and who our guests are. But the actual meat of the conversations is in the transcripts, which I think is like really interesting if you think about it that way. Yeah, I saw that message as well. And I'm like, are you interested? Do you have the bandwidth, to do that?
That would be amazing. I think this is something really worth doing. And just
it's a
the
huge
sample we gathered,
Yeah.
it's just really unique. Like who can like say, oh, tomorrow I'm going to do a project and gathers 250 unique innovations in the world and have rich
Right.
conversation. Like if we think about research perspective, this is definitely a longitudinal study.
I know, right? And I love what Chris said, which is I hadn't thought of it that way. I've often said that, if somebody had told me you were doing this 5 years later, I would not maybe have started. But the way he put it, which is I really like, which is here is a project. If you think about any academic grant which goes for 5 years, that's millions of dollars. The fact that we are all putting our own money in and doing this, I just think I love that. But I want to come back to something, Kurt, that you said, which I want to build on, which is that the world seemed open and it's increasingly seeming closed. And I think that is absolutely a fact. And if I think about one thing that I did right early on, which is get my own domain name. And in fact, when I first started at ASU, I actually wrote it into the contract that ASU would pay for my web hosting. A year or two into that, I said, that's not right. I should pay for it. And so I just took it over completely. And I said, ASU doesn't need to do it. So I got my own hosting. I got my own thing. Partly because then that's something. So the fact that we have Silver Lining for Learning, we own that. So we use LinkedIn to promote ourselves, but we don't post anything on LinkedIn because tomorrow LinkedIn might change its policy and all our content is gone. They own it. So that's one of the best things that I did very early on. I think, Kurt, you did as well, is to take up a piece of the internet and claim it to be your own. And then nobody can get into that then. And that's the way the philosophy of open can still stay alive. Because the moment, there were lots of people who used to write these essays on Facebook back in the day. That's all gone because Facebook's algorithms don't promote it or whatever. It's done. And Facebook owns it. You don't even own it. And I think those are the kinds of, that's something I think we should be grateful to Scott McLeod early on for doing that, for registering the domain name. We didn't even ask him to. He just said, oh, Silver Lining for Learning, here it is. And so on. I think that was a really good move on our part, not depending on any of the platforms, but depending on the open web. And that I think allows us to stay free, allows us to be open, and all of that. I think are a consequence of that.
Without doing a formal analysis, I have some instincts about the database. And I think one of the instincts I have, rightly or wrongly, is that the really transformative initiatives that we've hosted have started with being student-centered. So when you think about an ed tech podcast, you think about, oh, you know, the tech is going to be front and center in every single episode. And certainly we've had episodes where the tech was front and center. But the really sort of doing better things episodes where people, you walk away sort of in awe of what they've done on a shoestring, have all been about starting with the students, caring about them, watching the world throw away these folks, and saying, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not sure how I'm going to stop it, but I'm just going to keep inventing and working and inventing and working, and I'm not going to let that happen. And that I think would come out of a formal analysis as a big theme, that there's a lesson there about what you start with. If you really want to make a big difference, what you start with.
To build on what you said, Chris, and I feel so often these educators who are constantly innovate, constantly problem solve. There's no like one solution. They just keep on using the same trick over and over. They're constantly facing new problems, new challenges, and then they keep on innovating. And I think like the true innovation happen at the slow human capacity building level. It's not this quick fix educational technology. We're gonna like AI is gonna solve the problem, VR is gonna solve the problem. It's actually this human capacity building that take a long time. And I don't think people want to hear that. People want quick fix and solutions. And that's why, you know, because I don't think we can now have a conversation without mentioning AI. And I'm really worried people now kind of like AI-fy their classroom or teaching. I think that's going to solve the problem. It's the same like parallel to gamify learning, kind of like chocolate coated broccoli doesn't really do anything, doesn't innovate within the mechanism of teaching and learning, just kind of add these gaming layer to it. And then now people thinking about, oh, this class is not engaging. I'm going to bring AI. I'm going to have an AI agent to interact with student, answer that question, be more engaging. But that's not even the solution. The problem is deeper, is at the pedagogical level. And I don't think people think enough of that.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned gamify, because my criticism of gamify always used to be education has already been gamified. If you think about points and exams and quizzes and tests and, you know, certificates, it's already been gamified. I mean, you are adding another layer to that, but it's actually gamified at start. And it hasn't worked because it's been external motivators rather than internal motivators. And that's going to be the issue with AI as well. You know, it's the questions are, how do you get kids to, or learners or whoever to, you know, and this is where I think Zhao brings his piece in always, you know, in terms of his perspective on this, and which is like, how do you tap those talents, those potentials, those interests, those passions? You know, that's got to be the beginning, and rest of it is going to be, you know, surface at some level. It's going to, you know, address the surface issues. So yeah, so that was always my thing. It's like, yeah, we already gamified it. You know, what's a course if it's not, you know, if you have to quizzes and you've got to score so much on the quiz, then you get to the next level, you know. So it is gamified.
Well, and people don't think enough about the novelty effect. I
Yes.
remember when I was in school learning about the Hawthorne effect, where this industrial plant, they increased the amount of lighting and work productivity went way up. And they thought, wow, lighting correlates with work productivity. And they, you know, marketed this as a big innovation. And then somebody had the brains to turn the lighting down and productivity went up again. Because it turns out it isn't the lighting. It's the fact that somebody is acting like he cares about you or she cares about you and making a change that's supposed to be helping you. And you see this with AI and many, many other educational technologies. It's like, you know, the dinosaurs, volcanoes, and zombies stuff. people say students love it. They're so impressed when an AI talks to them. They're so impressed with the beauty of a volcano and so on. Well, by the fifth time, the novelty effect is gone. And it's like, oh no, not another volcano. Oh no, this chatbot isn't very interesting. Why don't we see if we can break it? And it's in my speeches, I talk about the fact that when I heard the dogs could sing, I was really excited until I realized they didn't sing very well. And that's a lot of what we're facing with ed tech, is all these people saying, wow, I exposed kids to something and they picked up, they were motivated, they paid attention, they learned more, this is the answer. Nope, it's the novelty effect.
So there's this great quote, which is, that it's impressive to watch a dog walk on its hind legs. It's not that they're doing a really good job with it, but it's just crazy that they can do it at all. And I think a lot of time AI output is exactly that. The fact that it can spit out a poem is impressive, but it's maybe not done well at all. And I just submitted an article for the Tech Trend series that we do. Dana and I wrote this. And this was something that I didn't know much about, and it was kind of interesting for me to learn about it. So for me, curiosity had always been a positive, right? That curiosity is a good thing. And in learning, and children's curiosity is something that you build on, and it goes right back to Dewey. But more recent psychological research on curiosity actually unpacks that into two different kinds of curiosity. And there is discovery curiosity and deprivation curiosity. And discovery curiosity is a positive thing. Discovery curiosity is always asking the next question. Turns out there is another kind of curiosity, which is a nagging uneasiness with any gap, anything that you cannot explain. And if you give anything that will fill it up, you will accept it and move on. And so there is strong correlation now showing that people with deprivation curiosity often believe in misinformation and fake news, conspiracy theories, and so on, because they attempt to answer the question, and you don't have the discovery curiosity to probe deeper and ask questions about it. And so the paper that we just wrote sort of looked at this idea of personalization of learning that AI is claimed to do, and argued that it depends on the kind of curiosity the learner is bringing to the mix. That if they are coming in with a deprivation curiosity, that AI will give them some answer, hallucinated or otherwise, and they will just accept it at face value. And that's that. So it will be quote unquote personalized, but it will not lead to positive learning outcomes. While discovery curiosity, whether or not you have AI, is going to push you to try to get more and learn more and figure out more. And by, in some ways, being naive about that, which is if you look at a lot of the personalization rhetoric coming out of corporates or whatever, it's all about like, oh, for once we have a tutor which can be one-on-one and do this and do that. It's like, what is that tutor doing? Is it really providing you that friction that is needed for learning? And learning is hard work. It's not about just knowing the answer. It is about the process. And so there's a lot of issues around AI and personalization that I think would be great to get some people who are working in that space to come in as guests. More, maybe working more in the theory space, but would, I think, enlighten this conversation somewhat, because I find that conversation sometimes somewhat naive about like the role of AI and personalization and so on.
And it's the students as well that are naive. There's a lot of fool's gold out there. Mm-hmm. So students say, I like AI because it gives me an answer that's simple, concise, and clear. Well, if you're talking about something complicated, I guarantee you, without even looking at it, that any answer that's simple, concise, and clear is wrong. And so, students, because of the gamification of education, students are looking for that multiple choice that's the right answer, or that short answer that just satisfies the assessment, not understanding that things that can't be measured by psychometric tests don't fit into the multiple choice or short answer way of thinking.
I'm just thinking about this notion of epistemic authority. And I feel like in the current schooling system, students already give their epistemic authority to the textbook, to their teachers, to, these answers to the multiple choice. And then when you bring a so-called personalized tutor, if the students still assume the same kind of epistemic authority to give this AI tutor the same kind of epistemic authority, they are at the passive seats because they feel, oh, they're not there to question this, to challenge this. This AI tutor is there to teach them. But if we flipped around to empower learners to assume epistemic authority, to say, okay, let me really judge what this is saying. Let me figure out what is going on. Let me cross-check. Let me ask my peers, my teachers, and use that as one part of the, use AI tutor as one part of the learning ecosystem. And I think that can be very empowering. But unfortunately, I think we just kind of giving AI this unwarranted epistemic authority in the classroom, which is really scary.
So I didn't use the phrase epistemic authority, but I used something from which is called the fluency heuristic, which is a cognitive bias that we have, that if something is said to us fluently and confidently, we believe it more than if you hesitate and hem and haw a little bit. Well, actually, like Chris, you said, the complex problems that we have actually do require us in some way to hem and haw a little bit. That's a positive, not a negative. Reflecting and thinking, it's, oh, maybe, but actually, oh, I'm not so sure. That's actually a strength. And we have undermined that so much. And then you combine that with sort of the fluency heuristic and this epistemic authority thing that you're talking about. I think that another layer of why AI gets problematic, And I was the final thought, I was reminded of this quote, and I looked it up right now, talking about, and it says basically any philosophy that can be put in a nutshell belongs there. And I think any educational idea that can be put in a nutshell or an edtech solution belongs in the nutshell, So, but I think that, what was the phrase you used? Lydia, tell me again, I'm going to write this down. Epistemic authority?
Oh, epistemic authority. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I think that plus fluency heuristic is a powerful idea.
I want to take this conversation in a slightly different direction. And by the way, at eLearn last week in Bangkok, seems like everyone who was massively attending any session that had AI in the title, and the SIG for AI was massively attended as well, with the other SIGs not so much. So it's just like AI. Anyways, I want to reflect back again on the last 250 episodes, 249 episodes. When you look at them, a couple peak moments happened when we had youth involved in those episodes, as we all realize, and we all were excited about early on what was happening in China, that Young brought in Hawaii and other parts of the world. That episode in particular stands out, but it was a series of episodes that Punya did on entrepreneurs in India that was particularly exciting to me, because they came in a wave. It wasn't a one-off. It was what was going on in different parts. I think if we reflect back, China, we've had a few episodes, but India, the Beyond 8 schools that we had recently, I've had, conversations with them, the One Room Digital Schoolhouse, India, Pakistan. I think those shows were phenomenal. But when you think about it, it was the US, India, and China in particular, we've had shows with youth. I wonder if somehow we could tap into, other countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Chile, Ecuador, Peru. While I love those shows from India and China and US, I wonder if we've got any connections to some smaller countries that we don't necessarily hear about, and we could feature. We've had Myanmar. Chris had the young people from Myanmar doing augmented reality early on. I wonder what happened to them, by the way, since the government coup happened after we had them on the show, or a series of government coups, military coups. But anyways, does anyone have any places around the world where they have a contact or two that we could tap into and do a show about, some of the themes that we've explored here in other places.
Well, regional conferences are an untapped resource for several reasons. I mean, eLearn is an example. eLearn was right in the middle of the countries some of the countries that you mentioned, but its predominant language is English. It costs money to go. The submission process involves a level of, if we had a comparable submission process for Silver Lining for Learning, we would have gone out of business in the first year. So I'm sure that at regional conferences that are bottom up, that are in the native language, that are, kind of people know who's doing something. And so that's how you get into the conference program. We could find them, but the language barrier is a significant one. I mean, to identify where these regional conferences are and what name they go under, and then run them through Google Translate and try to make sense of it, that's hard. And in a way, what we haven't accomplished, even though we've encouraged people to do it, is spin-offs of Silver Lining for Learning that might be more regional, or that might have a different theme than EdTech. Because we're happy to have somebody run off with this model. Admittedly, the co-hosts won't be as intelligent and charming, but it could still work for them, I think.
And as well dressed.
And Kurt, did you mention Nepal? I love those two shows, and the kids came in, talk about MOOC, and then later on you did another show with them, and they were so grown up. It's amazing.
I know.
And then maybe we should do more of these, like a follow-up shows
Revisit.
with some kids. Yeah.
That's one of the things, to do a revisit show. I'm actually working with somebody in India right now. They work for this nonprofit called Quest, and we've had Akash Sethi, the head of Quest, on our show a few years back. He and his aunt runs this school called the Riverside School, which is an amazing school. And he leads this organization, Quest Alliance. Well, one of the people in that show, in that organization, has been working over the years with youth across the country, and wrote this amazing piece for the long form magazine Caravan, which is India's sort of premier long form magazine, sort of the equivalent of the Atlantic or the New Yorker, which was this really in-depth story about this young girl and her friends who are getting radicalized by YouTube, to the point that they're questioning the history that is being taught to them in their school. It's a very deeply researched piece about learning that's happening outside of school. So I've been talking with her to see if we can get her and a couple of her colleagues who have been working in that space to join us, because I think that's the big untold story of our time in some ways, is that as we focus our attention on schooling and classrooms and how we can support teachers and create better learning environments, we don't have enough of a sense of things that are happening outside of it. And they in some ways Myanmar is a great example, where Facebook's algorithms basically led to genocide against the Rohingya. And that has impact on schooling and education and learning far more than what educators could do in their particular classrooms, right? And so I've been trying to talk to Bhavna to see if we can get her and a couple of other people on board to do an episode on that, because I think that will be a fascinating story. And I can share it's behind a paywall, but I can share the PDF of that story. It's really worth reading. Very detailed journalistic sort of account of, and it's a village which is not even a village. It's a town near where my parents lived. It's in my state of Orissa, and clearly it is on nobody's radar. But the long fingers of our social media platforms go down to the level of villages across the world. So it's kind of an interesting. So yeah, I'm looking into that. We hopefully can get something going.
I think we've all got a number of shows that we're working on, and We do listen to people who send us emails and suggestions. So if you're listening to this show and you have a suggestion for Silver Lining for Learning episodes in the coming years, in coming months, in the coming weeks, please let us know. We'd be happy to entertain each of those ideas. So yeah, we welcome. We are an open show. We schedule things out maybe a couple months in advance, but every once in a while we have show episodes that open up. So you never know, when you contact us, we might turn around and contact you right back and get you on the show, or the people that you recommend to us. We have not gotten overwhelmed with suggestions, but they are increasing out there. So we do appreciate them.
Kurt, I think this brought an idea to me that we should post. This is something, Lydia, you and I can do on the LinkedIn group, is solicit guests and be very clear about the kinds of guests we are soliciting. Like if you're doing something interesting and because our networks are pretty spread, and I think we can get some guests through that, as well. Yeah, that'd be exciting. But I have to tell you, I got a realization of how much of a seat of the pants operation we are. I got invited to be on a podcast recently. And so I said, yeah, sure, we can do it, whatever. And he said, how does February of 2026 look like? I'm like, man, I would love for Silver Lining to be locked down till February of 2026. But the pleasure, I think, of this, I think we're coming close to our time. So maybe a last few comments to close this episode. But I think the pleasure of Silver Lining for me has also been this sort of homegrown ethos that we have, right? I mean, we don't have long meetings to plan strategy. We trust each other to come up with interesting examples and stories and guests. And then we are sort of perpetually scrambling sometimes, and other times we are all set for like 8 episodes straight for 2 months. And, we go through those cycles. And I think that's been part of the fun of doing this, has been its sort of emergent and sort of organic nature. And in some ways that ends up, I think, reflecting our values in ways in terms of who we are asked to come on and what kind of questions we ask them, more than if it had been very strategically planned 5 years ago. So there's something to be said for that organicity, if that's a word, of Silver Lining. So, and again, as always, I want to thank my co-hosts. I have spent more than 300 hours with you. I think if we took the off episodes and occasional meetings, and at least 280 hours of my life over the past 5 years has been spent with all of you. And that's been wonderful. And Lydia, as the newest member, it's great. And side conversations with Lydia about her name lead to interesting blog posts in my website sometimes. So it's been very enriching at so many levels. So I just want to thank all of you for that.
I think it's double that really all the hidden time that goes into this, Punya. And there's a lot of extra time. But we don't have a sound manager. We don't have a script manager, audio check, all these things that, when you go to some of these fancy conferences, all of a sudden, yeah, the folks there are like, wow, we're going to do a dry run, We've never done a dry run on this show, ever. We may have talked about the format of a particular show here or there, but that'd be a rarity for us. So if you see the flow, sometimes a little disengagement, a few seconds lost, we don't have dry runs. This is all off the cuff. We don't edit much of the shows. Once in a while, we have something to we don't have many swear words. Thank God, in the show. This is not a Richard Pryor broadcast by any means. Anyways, so we're thankful to you, Punya, for all that you've done, making these 250 shows possible, because it would not have been possible without you, without each of us. But you in particular have carried the significant weight in making the shows available for the world. If that production doesn't happen, none of this can be there. We wouldn't be there. We wouldn't be here. So thank you, Punya. And not only you producing, your creativity is off the charts all the time. And Punya's a guest in my class, and about 15 minutes after we end, talking about his new scale on creativity. So you're a creativity expert, and you're an example, a role model of what it's like to be a creative person in this field, in education and in ed tech. The world of ed tech and education benefits from you and what you've done for all of us. And I hope some of your mentees, some of your students can carry on in your footsteps. And we have to broaden this creative mindset for the ed tech world. You're the start, but I hope that your mentees are listening to this show and thinking about what they can do, and all of our mentees out there. So I want to say thanks to Punya. Chris, I think you were going to try and jump. I had to jump in first, but Chris?
No, I think that one of the reasons that we're still here is that we like each other, but we complement each other. There are dynamic tensions of different kinds that come out, and people not only come to hear the guests, they come to hear the co-hosts. And I think that's been a great strength.
I think we should label our podcast as homemade and organic. You know, with these labels like vegan, gluten-free, we should do homemade, organic.
Like a sticker.
Yeah, like.
Okay.
Hello,
If I
bullshit.
design the mug or the T-shirt, right? We'll make sure we'll have that
We'll make
homemade
sure
and
have those-
organic.
those
100% organic.
100% organic. Yeah.
No BS, says Chris.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I just want to say I'm so grateful to all of you. Sometimes, I do this show every Saturday. I'm the youngest, like a most
don't
junior
rub it
scholar.
in.
No, wait, junior scholar among all of you. And sometimes, before I started this journey, I look up to all of you. And I was like, well, these learning sciences and tech guru, what am I doing in this show? What kind of perspective can I bring? What should I say? But everyone just so generous, welcoming, and I feel every week I'm being mentored by all of you. And thank you so much for having me on the show. It's absolute pleasure. So thank you.
So, Lydia, I have to say, you're joining the show, as Chris often says, increase the intelligence and the average age, improve the average age. But I think the episodes that you brought in were perspectives that were not necessarily on our radar. And I think that's the value of having this diverse group of people. And it's funny because I can almost predict, having worked with you guys for so long, what your questions are going to be. So if someday Zhao is not here, I can channel Zhao. I know what question to ask, and Kurt and Chris and so on. And I'm sure you can do the same for me. But that's been the pleasure of it, which is this different perspectives that we bring. And I think it makes the show interesting, and there is enough of an overlap that we don't hate each other. We don't on completely opposite spectrum, but there are different perspectives, and I think that is valuable. So it's awesome. And finally, Kurt, thank you for those kind words about. But this is an itch of mine, which is I love doing graphic design. I love doing this stuff. So this is actually my when I get an email from one of you saying, "Oh, we need an image for this episode." Nothing gives me more joy, because then I know for the next 30 minutes I can zone out of whatever I was doing and do that. And it's my meditation. So it keeps me sane. So thank you. It's my pleasure. Absolutely.
250 episodes, guys.
Yeah.
Where has the time gone? Well, it's gone to good use. Featuring a lot of interesting people doing important things in the world, making a difference in a world that's becoming increasingly challenged for educators, for students, for parents, for professors, for high school, secondary teachers, elementary teachers. It's increasingly difficult to try and maintain the flow and momentum and motivation and engagement in a world that's constantly changing and become increasingly closed, unfortunately, for education. And we're trying to open it back up. And so is EdTech Books. And so are a number of the people that we featured on this show. We have to say a big thank you to the prior 249 people who appeared in the prior 249 shows, because they are doing the legwork out there, the mind work that makes education and educators the space in which positive, important things are happening today, despite all the issues, problems, and challenges, barriers that are in front of us. It's all of you that provide the shining lights that make it possible for us to be on highlighting what is possible, what will be possible, and where we could be going in the future and the directions thereof. So thank all of you.
All right, who has the next episode?
So, next week, we are taking a week off to celebrate all the many holidays that are associated with the end of October, Diwali, All Saints' Day, Halloween. I personally have found this Halloween easy because if I want to watch something scary on TV, I don't have to search. I just tune to the news and I see all the horror that I could ever want to see. But we are continuing to celebrate, and on 2 weeks from today, on November 1st, Paul Kim, who was part of episode 8, in fact, he was all of episode 8, will be back to talk about his latest work with Afghanistan and his continuing work with Smile. He's one of our heroes, and so we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.